Hey there, guys. So recently I saw Toy Story 4, and seeing as that's a fairly big one coming from Pixar, I figured I would share my thoughts and feelings on that film with you guys. But first, a little bit of channel business. So as you guys know, the way that I set up my channel typically with the big releases are Disney Guy review video and then something in the middle, usually something that's not a review, different topic, something along those lines. So with that in mind though, while my patrons know that I have a pretty filled out schedule throughout the Renaissance, this video that is supposed to be coming up, I actually don't have filled at the moment, but I have a solution. What I'm doing is I have a couple of choices for a video put up on my Patreon right now that every one of my patrons will get a chance to vote for. Even the $1 patrons, everybody gets a chance to vote for it. So if you want a chance to basically decide what's going to be the next video up on the channel, check out my channel on Patreon. It's patreon.com/JoeTheDisneyGuy. Link will be down below to help me figure out what I'm going to do for the next video. But one last thing I wanted to talk about before we get into the meat and potatoes of the Toy Story 4 review itself is there was no short before this film, and it feels almost blasphemous to go see a Pixar movie without a short in front of it. I mean, before Incredibles 2, we had Bao, which was this unbelievable Academy Award-winning short, and with Pixar movies in general, that's always been part of the experience for me, is that you get these incredible shorts. But I think Pixar, aside from just the great movies, it's these great shorts that they have this long tradition with. So it did feel sort of blasphemous to not have anything in front of it, and it's unfortunate. So I don't really know what the story is. I don't know why they didn't have a short before Toy Story 4. I just hope that it's not a habit and it was just a weird one-off. I think this might have actually been the first ever Pixar movie to be released without any form of short in front of it. So yeah, hopefully just a weird one-off because, I kind of missed it. Okay, now, so although it has been a little bit over a week since it got released, I'm sure plenty of people have seen it. Here's your warning. We're about to get into the Toy Story 4 review. There is absolutely going to be talk about heavy spoilers and the ending and things like that. So if you have not seen Toy Story 4 yet and you don't want anything spoiled or ruined for you, now's your chance. Pause the video, go watch the movie, come on back. I promise we'll still be here. This is your warning. I'm not taking any responsibility. Alright, so with all that out of the way, Toy Story 4. So, you have to judge, I feel, Toy Story 4 a little bit differently than how you judge some other movies. Because when you're dealing with a Toy Story movie, there's a floor, and the floor is pretty high. Because you know that you're going to be dealing with great characters, you know the animation's going to be great, you know the story is probably going to be pretty emotional and pretty good. So it is almost impossible to get a bad Toy Story movie. Like traditionally, it's just a bad movie. So you already kind of know you're going in at minimum, it's going to be a good movie. The question though for Toy Story 4, especially with how Toy Story 3 wrapped up, is it necessary, or was it necessary now that we've seen it? And that's a question I think I'll address at the end of this, but that's something to kind of keep in mind as we go through, is that do we think that Toy Story 4 is necessary? Because ultimately, I think that's kind of the big judgment point with this movie, because, again, it's kind of accepted Toy Story 4 is probably going to be a good movie. And with that in mind, yes, Toy Story 4 is a very good movie. Again, you have characters that we know and love, and they're all very well done here. In particular, Woody is definitely, the star of the show, as you would expect. Still, it's always great to see him. Tom Hanks always does a great job with him. And Buzz is funny and has his moments in this one. The disappointing part for me was that we really didn't get to see a lot of like Jessie or some of the other characters who we've known and loved. I would have liked to have seen more Rex and things like that. I know in some cases it's kind of tough for them, like Slinky Dog, though I think they already replaced his voice actor. He had passed away before 3, but he has a different voice actor. Mr. Potato Head, they were just using archival footage for his voice. So yeah, I understand there were limitations somewhere when you're dealing with a movie franchise that's, oh boy, almost 30 years old. These things are going to happen. So yeah, a little disappointing that we didn't get like a lot from Jessie. We did get some moments with her, but the characters who were coming back, the return of Bo Peep was awesome, and she's a much different character than when we first met her, because she is a lot different. She has more of a role in this one. Really, in the first 2 movies, I don't want to say she's a background character, but she's much more of a supplementary character. She's not carrying any of the major plot points. She's just kind of there to be a little bit of like emotional backup for Woody, I guess we'll call it. And so yeah, they definitely she's front and center in this one. She's a major part of the plot in this one. They kind of flesh out her backstory, retconned her backstory a little bit. We'll kind of get into that when we talk about the story itself. But yeah, the returning characters I thought they did a very good job with, and the new characters I thought were very fun. Ducky and Bunny, voiced by Key and Peele, are hilarious. I think they're one of the funniest parts of the whole movie. Just every scene that they're in, they have such a good chemistry with each other, just naturally. So the absurdity that they kind of add is pretty funny. The plush rush scenes are definitely they are some of the most laugh out loud reactions, at least in the theater that I was in. Gabby is interesting because I guess she's the de facto villain in this one, and she certainly acts like it, especially early on. But what I thought was interesting was that they kind of started to add that traditional Toy Story tragic backstory a little bit earlier than they normally do. So she was a little more rounded out, and really by the last third of the movie, maybe even a little bit past the last third, but the last kind of chunk of the movie, she's no longer a villain at all, which is a bit of a change for Toy Story movie. So that was kind of cool to see. And then Forky. We have to talk about Forky. I would have liked if Forky were maybe a little bit more part of the movie. He kind of disappears a lot in the middle. He's been in the marketing and everything else, and he's sort of the crux of the first third of the movie, and then he kind of goes away for a while. But all told, he's a very fun character. He's a funny character. The whole concept of a spork being a toy, all of that was very fun to play out. And again, very lively. And again, overall, I just thought he was a fun character. I also have to make special mention for the animation. Like I said in the front, I mean, you kind of know going in the animation is going to be fantastic. And it was. The animation is incredible. There's these shots going around online of like the close-ups of the characters and just showing off the detail that they put into the characters. It is, I mean, unreal. I mean, it's an incredible amount of detail. But why I wanted to make special mention of it is before I went to go see this movie on television, like on Freeform or something, they were showing a bunch of Toy Story movies. And I actually watched the back half of Toy Story 1 for the first time in a while. And man, just seeing where they were in 1995 to where they are now. I mean, obviously, there's been major advances in computer animation in that time. But actually kind of just seeing it, particularly Bo Peep, when you see what she looks like in the beginning to what she looks like now, it really is mind-blowing. It's incredible the leaps the animation has gone. It's incredible how good the animation is now. I know there was a time when I, like a lot of other people, were not the biggest fan of computer animation. It didn't look like, the hand-drawn stuff didn't resemble the hand-drawn stuff. And while there's certainly still an argument for hand-drawn animation and how it just really can't be replicated, you'd be hard-pressed now with how far the computer animation has come, and you see it in this movie in particular, to really say that it's an inferior version of animation. I thought the animation was just incredible in this. Again, go see some of those screenshots if you haven't of the detail of Toy Story 4, because it really is fascinating to see how just every little stitch, no pun intended, gets looked at here. But the big part we got to talk about here is the story, because again, Toy Story 3 ended on a very emotional, resounding end. So, I mean, I was one of those people who I would have been perfectly okay if we never had another Toy Story movie. That was a great ending for me. I was fine with them doing the shorts and stuff. We wanted to keep the brand going and keep doing Toy Story shorts. But in terms of an actual Toy Story movie, I wasn't sure if we needed another one. But we got another one, so how does it hold up? Well, I will say the story does continue in a natural way. I was concerned that we weren't going to be able to kind of recover from the emotional ending, but it does sort of pick up naturally. It does, I think, play out good. It definitely gets you invested in the story itself. And again, it is, like I said before, it is very focused on Woody in particular and kind of trying to come to grips with what do I do now. I think he has a line somewhere towards the back end of the movie where he saw Andy grow up and go off to college and everything else. So now what? Like, what's my purpose now? And that's definitely one of the major themes of the movie, and it's definitely a weighty theme. And where I think it's interesting is Toy Story 1, 2, and 3, I thought was always hit people in my age group so hard because we sort of grew up with Andy, and there were elements of it that we sort of had that we could directly relate to. But I think there's another side to it that I hadn't really seen before, and that is the side that a parent would see. As they watch their kid grow up and they have to let go of their kid. And this is sort of the next natural progression to that, in that, okay, well, now what? They've gone off, they're living their life, they're an adult now, so now what do I do? So I thought that was an interesting and a natural way to go. So I could definitely see where someone, who has those experiences could really relate to the story and really latch on to the story and those feelings that it drums up. But here's the thing, and it's not really a knock on the movie, but one of the things that I sort of felt was, and some of it is our knowledge of what Toy Story movies and Pixar movies in general have been doing, because they can get very weighty, they can get very emotional, they don't shy away from the heavy stuff. I think we all sort of felt where the eventual end game of this movie was going, with Woody electing basically to stay with Bo and leave his friends behind. And look, that scene is wildly emotional. It really is. I mean, that's the one that's going to get a lot of people. I know. It definitely makes you choke up a little bit. It made me choke a little bit when you get that goodbye scene between Woody and Buzz, because yeah, I mean, those two have been our two main characters since the first movie way back in the 90s. So that's a hugely emotional moment, a well done moment. I thought they did it very well. They really punch you with that last line, that Infinity and Beyond really hit you hard on that one. But the thing is, because it felt like, at least to me, from early on, that was always where this story was headed, while it was very emotional and it hit you very hard, I don't know if it was as emotional or ultimately satisfying an ending as Toy Story 3. Toy Story 3 for me felt like it wrapped up everybody's story. We went through Andy's going off to college. Well, now we're going to Bonnie, and the cycle repeats itself. It did feel like a nice conclusion for all of our characters. Toy Story 4 is a very nice conclusion, it feels like, for Woody's character in particular, even though we still kind of don't know what's going to happen to the rest of them. Obviously, everybody's kind of at peace with where they are, but it does feel like it's much more of a Woody ending than an everybody ending, if that makes sense. So, in that regard, I don't know if it's as satisfying as 3, but that being said, again, the ending is still very emotional, and it's still very satisfying because they do a good job of making you understand that this isn't a sad moment, at least certainly isn't for Woody. And really, they even make it seem for Buzz and the rest of the gang, it's not a sad moment, because Woody has found his purpose again. He was kind of wandering without a cause for a while, and now he has a purpose again. The only fear that I have is that it's going to be construed as he stayed for Bo, not necessarily for anything else. And there's certainly an element to that, but I don't think that was ultimately what made Woody make his decision. I think it was much more like helping kids and helping toys, and seeing Gabby and the lost child who he helped. I think, or she helped rather. I think that was more the turning point for Woody than Bo necessarily. But yeah, I could see where that would be kind of a weird personality thing for Woody, where he chooses the girl over the friends or whatever it is. But again, ultimately, that's not what I got out of it. But I could see where some people would be a little weird about that. And while we're on the topic of Bo, let's address that backstory for a second, because they absolutely changed it and retconned it a little bit. So in this movie, it's explained that Bo is actually part of a lamp that they got for Andy's sister when she was afraid of the dark. And while it certainly works and it does help give Bo, I guess, more importance in the background and the story and everything else, it's definitely changed. That definitely was not her original intention. I know it was always kind of a running joke as to why someone like Andy would have a toy Bo Peep, compared to all of his other toys. She never really made sense with everything else. So it does sort of fix that. But yeah, I mean, she was always in Andy's room. Andy was always playing with her. And in the first movie, I mean, Andy's sister is a baby. So either the baby was afraid of the dark, or Andy was kind of being a jerk by taking away Bo Peep from the light. because she certainly, I can't imagine, would be not afraid of the dark by that point. So like, yeah, it doesn't quite add up when when you're looking back on it. That is one of the things that kind of annoyed me a little bit, but ultimately it's really not that big a deal. But I thought it was worth pointing out that like it absolutely is a retcon, and if you think about it too much, it starts to fall apart a little bit. But again, ultimately it doesn't affect the movie all that much. I just thought it was interesting to point out. But again, ultimately the question comes down to, was this movie necessary? And like I was saying before, there are elements of this movie that I think were very well done. The overall themes I thought were well done and were very weighty. Ultimately, it was a very funny movie. It was one of the funnier Toy Story movies that I can remember. Granted, again, I haven't watched the last Toy Story movies in a bit of a while, so maybe I'm just forgetting, but I thought this was one of the funniest Toy Story movies that they had. But with all that being said, I'm kind of on the fence as to the whole necessary thing. Because like I was saying before, there's a lot of good in this. And again, it's a good movie. It really is. It's an entertaining movie. It's a satisfying movie. But because the ending, again, really focuses on Woody more than the rest of the group, I don't know if the ending for Toy Story 3 wasn't a better ending for the franchise overall as opposed to Toy Story 4. But then on the flip side, again, because Woody really is, it's always been about Woody to a point. That's always been kind of what the major plots have surrounded about. I mean, Toy Story 1, it's Woody trying to come to grips with Buzz Lightyear and possibly not being Andy's favorite toy anymore. Toy Story 2 is Woody kind of finding out, his history and having to decide between, going through that or going back to Andy and still feeling that he was needed there. Toy Story 3 is, trying to keep hold onto this thing as Andy is getting older, and again, Woody kind of leading the charge on that. So because the franchise has ultimately always been about Woody, there's the argument that this ending being Woody-centric is a more conclusive, wrapped-up ending. So, I do see both sides to it. For me personally, again, I'm kind of on the fence as to if it was necessary. I just thought Toy Story 3 was a perfect ending. But again, that being said, I can't definitively say it wasn't a necessary movie. So I think a lot of it does depend on you and your personal feelings. Again, I see both sides of it. I lean on I kind of like the ending Toy Story 3 better. You guys tell me what you think. What do you think that Toy Story 4 was a necessary movie, and which ending do you think wraps up the series and the franchise better? Toy Story 3 or Toy Story 4? I'd be very curious to see what you guys think and what people think as a whole. And with that in mind, the reaction that I've seen to this movie has been kind of reflective of that. I mean, critically, it seems like it's been fine. There's no real complaints. Again, you know what you're getting with a Toy Story movie. It's going to be objectively a good movie. But from fan reaction, I have seen both sides of the argument. I've seen people who thought this was a great and definitive ending and loved it and were very happy that it was made. And I've seen people not be so happy about it and be disappointed about it. I know that some family members that I have fall in that latter group. They weren't the biggest fans of Toy Story 4. But, yeah, so, a little bit of a mixed reaction. Again, nobody, I think, is saying it's a bad movie, because it's not. It's much like when I was critically talking about Incredibles 2 and some of the issues there. Let's get one thing straight. This is a good movie. You should see this movie. But as we dive deeper into it, you kind of, make your decisions as to which one you like better. It's tough when you're trying to compare movies in a franchise that is as epic as Toy Story is and as critically revered as Toy Story is, because you're talking about some great all-time movies. With the first Toy Story movie, Toy Story 2 I always thought was good, but probably a step below 1, and then 3 I thought was magnificent as well. So it's one of those ones where when you're comparing movies to like these all-time great movies, it can get a little bit weird sometimes. But again, that's why we're here. Everybody gets an opinion. We're all discussing it back and forth. But yeah, I've seen sort of some mixed reactions to it from the fan base. I also thought it was interesting. I was reading an article that because Toy Story in its opening weekend opened up to, I believe it was $118 million, which is like a crazy number. Obviously, that's a ton of money. and that Disney Pixar was actually disappointed by that because they were projecting about 140 million, which again is an absurd number. So I just thought it was interesting kind of seeing that and how they were actually disappointed in the release of Toy Story 4. And there's probably a bunch of reasons for why it didn't gross that high in its initial weekend. I know at least where I was, it was very nice out. So some people might have been spending their time outside instead of going to the movies. You're having blockbuster after blockbuster. You're in the middle. In the middle of that summer stretch. You had Avengers on one side. You had Spider-Man on the other side. You still have Lion King. There was Aladdin. So it is one of those things where you had these blockbusters, and not everybody's like me where they're going to the movies like every weekend. So there's a bunch of reasons. But that being said, it's hard for me to say $118 million is disappointing by any stretch of the imagination. It's not like they're losing money. And then this weekend, Toy Story 4, I believe, was at the top of the box office again, if not close to it. I know they beat out like yesterday and things like that. So, Toy Story 4 is doing fine. I think it's more of an interesting commentary on our expectations for box office stuff. It'll be interesting to talk about this one day whenever I get to the review, the official Disney era review for this, to talk about kind of how much it made versus how much it was expected. It'll probably be an interesting bit of a video to talk about, right? So yeah, I mean, those are my basic thoughts on Toy Story 4. Like I said, I'm very curious to see what your guys' opinions and thoughts are on Toy Story 4, Toy Story 4 versus Toy Story 3, and the other ones. Let's throw everything in there. Which one was your favorite Toy Story and why, that sort of thing. I'm very curious to see your reactions to it because, like I said, I think it's a movie where it kind of incites people to talk about stuff. And we're in this crazy nostalgia stretch right now at the movie theaters. Everything's like from the 90s. So, I think that you're getting a lot of, there's been a lot of this talk about, is the one that's out now as good as the one that came out back then? So kind of interesting. Toy Story 4 kind of slots right into that discussion. So I'd be curious to see what you guys have to say about that. Again, be sure to check out my Patreon page if you guys want to have a say in what my next video is. Again, every single patron from the $1 level all the way up, everybody's going to have a say in this one, so now it's the perfect time to jump in and help out on that if you guys have been on the fence about it. Again, that's a huge thing for my channel. I don't make any money via YouTube and ads and all those things. This is basically how I try to supplement the channel and try to keep things going. I know I definitely want to upgrade this camera here. I want to upgrade some lights. To do that, I need money. So yeah, so the Patreon page definitely helps build and grow this channel. Be sure to follow me on Twitter for all updates with myself on the channel. Check out my other channel. I've been a little slow in uploads on that this past week. I was away for a little bit. I've had a bit of a flood situation. It's a whole thing. So my setup for filming hasn't been great, so I've been holding back on releases a little bit while I kind of get my life back in order down there. Yeah, but check out that other channel and subscribe to that. Anyway, this week, things will get kind of back to normal with all that. At least, fingers crossed, it should. And then we'll get back to normal with that. And yeah, I guess that wraps it up for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Tell me what your thoughts are on Toy Story 4. And I will be seeing you all real soon.